me!
911, what's your emergency?
A scream from the lake! It was Richard!
Slow down! Where are you right now?
Birch Trail Dock! Please hurry!
Do you see him in the water?
No, just black water. It's too quiet.
Don't go in! Grab the life ring on the dock, keep a flashlight on the water. Help is on the way!
Okay, hurry, please.
In the world of wild places, every step into the backcountry carries an unspoken warning. A moose towering and often thought of as placid can suddenly charge when the air grows tense and its space feels threatened. A bear glimpsed far across a valley is rarely as distant as it looks, its stride capable of closing ground faster than any human could hope to outrun. Even a crow, just a common glossy bird, can turn into a furious defender of its nest, diving and clawing to drive away intruders. Knowledge helps, but it isn't armor. Rules, books, and signs may teach us caution, yet they cannot stop the missteps that bring humans too close to creatures that were never meant to be tamed. This story centers on one such misstep, a fatal clash between a seasoned hiker and a grizzly bear. What makes it chilling isn't simply the violence, but the small, almost absurd mistake that set the encounter in motion. The tragedy unfolded in Denali National Park and Preserve, once called Mount McKinley National Park, a stretch of Alaskan wilderness so immense it dwarfs nearly every other protected land in America. At its heart rises Denali itself, the tallest mountain on the continent, its summit piercing the clouds at over 20,000 feet. Denali's 6 million acres weave together dense boreal forests at the lower reaches, rolling tundra painted in wildflowers at the middle elevations, and fields of ice and naked stone higher up where nothing grows. More than 450 species of plants bloom here, while the skies and valleys are alive with eagles, owls, foxes, wolves, and caribou. Bears roam in great numbers, both the shaggy, cinnamon-coated grizzlies and the darker, stockier black bears spotted along riversides or padding silently through open meadows. The park also holds 13 wolf packs, countless beavers, martens, and smaller predators, each stitched into a web of life that is as beautiful as it is unforgiving. Despite drawing more than 600,000 visitors each year, Denali rarely feels crowded. The scale swallows people whole, leaving them scattered tiny figures against vast ridges and endless plains. For many adventurers, that is the draw to walk where the silence is broken only by wind across the tundra or the crack of ice on distant glaciers. To be alone, truly alone, with nothing but raw wilderness. But solitude comes at a price. In Denali, the absence of fellow hikers also means the absence of protection. When danger comes, there is no buffer. You face it as you are one human against the apex predators that have ruled this land since long before names like park or preserve were ever written on a map. This is the story of a man who made a simple, fatal decision. The story of Richard White, a carpenter whose ordinary evening along Florida's Lake Carlton would unravel into something unthinkable. He wasn't a reckless daredevil. He wasn't chasing thrills. He was just a man seeking a moment of calm after a long day's work, stepping into water he believed was safe. What he found instead was a predator that had been sharing the same shoreline, silent and patient, waiting for its chance. It's a reminder that in places where wild and human lives overlap, the illusion of safety can collapse without warning. Richard White's story does not begin in Alaska. It began decades earlier on wind-lashed coasts and remote islands scattered across the world's oceans. Born in the United Kingdom and trained in biological sciences, he carved out a career that blurred the line between scientist guide and storyteller. Early in his path, he studied the effects of oil and gas exploration on seabird populations, which meant years spent on isolated outposts like Ascension, the Falklands, and the Seychelles. These weren't glamorous assignments. They were rugged, salt-scoured places where storms rolled in unannounced and supply boats were rare. Yet Richard thrived in that solitude, refining his eye for detail and his ability to read wild landscapes the way others read a printed page. Neighbors remembered his generosity, how he once rebuilt Mrs. Gable's collapsing fence over a weekend without asking for payment, then filled her yard with cut flowers from his own small garden. His friends remembered his laughter, loud, contagious, and impossible not to join, and his calmness that steadied a room. Richard's love for the outdoors was no hobby. It was stitched into who he was. He often sat on his porch in the evenings, listening to frogs, cicadas, in the soft rustle of palms, admiring the quiet balance of suburban Florida's wild edge. He knew both rivers and woods very well. From those beginnings grew a reputation as a wildlife expert whose authority came not from lecture halls alone, but from time in the field. He became known as a presenter who could hold an audience by weaving biology with lived experience, translating complex science into stories that made sense to travelers, students, and enthusiasts alike. His focus was ornithology and marine biology, but his reach was much wider. Whether it was a seabird rookery or a reef system, he made his listeners feel not just informed, but implicated, responsible for what they had seen. Safety and education anchored his work. Leading field outings, he emphasized caution, respect, and the understanding that the line between observer and participant can blur dangerously in wild places. His passport carried proof of that philosophy: expeditions across the Arctic from Svalbard to the Northwest Passage, the Russian far north in both ends of Antarctica from the peninsula to the Ross Sea, long arcs through the Atlantic islands from the Azores to Tristan da Cunha, voyages along South America's coasts and deep runs into the Amazon. He knew Alaska well, both for its wildlife and for the way its scale humbled even seasoned guides. To Richard, these journeys weren't bucket list conquests, they were living classrooms. Every landing, every hike, every briefing on a pitching deck was another chance to connect people to the places he loved most. By the time he set foot on Denali's gravel bars in August 2012, he wasn't just another backpacker chasing solitude. He was an expedition guide with global credentials, a man whose life had been dedicated to watching, teaching, and translating the wild for others. He had seen the far edges of the earth and returned with stories, photographs, and lessons. Denali was one more chapter, another canvas of tundra and stone, where he could move quietly, record carefully, and perhaps return home with fresh proof of the wilderness he spent a lifetime defending. That afternoon, however, the line he had taught others to respect would collapse around him, and the cautionary tale would become his own. On August 24, 2012, a 49-year-old San Diegan named Richard White set out near the Toklat River, the broad, silty, chocolate-colored braided waterway that Denali Park Road crosses on its run into Alaska's interior. He'd been solo in the backcountry for 3 nights, with 2 more to go under his permit. Married with a young daughter at home, he wasn't new to wilderness travel. Friends knew him as the kind who returned with clean camp logs, well-packed gear, and the kind of photographs that make a living room go quiet. That afternoon, the sky hung bright and thin wind combing willow leaves along a gravel bar about 3 miles south of the road. On his chest strap rode a safety whistle. On his hip, no bear spray, no firearm choices recorded on his permit and later noted by rangers. He followed the river's braided edge until a heavy shape shifted in pale willows, a large male grizzly head down feeding. White eased to a stop, raised his camera, and began to work. The first frame time-stamped at 12:58 in the afternoon. For the next several minutes, the river hissed, the wind nagged at his pack straps, and the bear stayed busy among berry-laden brush, while the shutter clicked methodical, steady, unhurried. He had come to witness the place as it was. The place answered by letting him look. The images would later show that he was too close from the start, roughly 75 yards by ranger reconstruction, closing to about 60 for the last frames, well inside Denali's minimum viewing distance of 300 yards, for bears, a rule repeated on every briefing and sign. Most frames were ordinary field notes, the bear's shoulders rolling under guard hair jaws, working through willow and berry. Gravel specks bright in hard daylight. Then the sequence tightened. In the final seconds, the animal lifted, angling its muzzle toward the lens. In another frame, it had shortened the gap posture, squared. Investigators later plotted the standpoints in the gravel bar and matched them to the timestamps of measured approach, a shortening distance, and then no more frames at all. There were no witnesses on the bar, only the data in the camera, the spacing of tracks, and a scuffed crescent in the stones. The inference was plain. The bear covered the remaining yards faster than a person can react, a reality Denali's rangers warn about when they tell visitors to back away the moment a bear notices them, and to maintain 3 football fields of space. White's choices that day broke the sequence recommended in the briefing: see the bear, increase distance, keep making noise, have spray ready. He carried a whistle, not spray. He remained in place and kept shooting, closing the book on retreat. The park would later say the frames were consistent with an encounter that turned decisive almost immediately after the last image. In a landscape where the river fabric shifts with every rain, The evidence stood out: churned gravel drag lines, scattered clothing. It did not take long, and it did not happen far from where the first shutter click sounded over the water at 12:58. Reconstruction teams read the scene like a storyboard, a straight line rush off the willows, a shallow V of heel marks where a man tried to shift back, a rough arc gouged by a pack skidding, a collapsed oval of brush, attack, counter, reaction. The bear closed, the first contact threw weight through shoulders, and gravel cracked. Stones rattled against an aluminum bottle, a strap popped, counter short desperate beats backpack lifted to chest height, a turn to put bulk between ribs and claws, a stumble, knees finding scree, whistle lanyards snapping, reaction mass driving down again, claws raking, then jaws pinning, a roll that plowed a furrow through willow stems, a hard thump where bodies hit a buried cobble. Air carried dust and river chill, willows shook and settled, the water kept hissing. Drag prints then angled off broad-toed pads and claw points pressed deep, pulling a load from the open bar toward denser cover. Investigators followed that line later to a cache tucked in the brush, an old pattern along Big Bear Country: move food out of view, return as needed. There was no spray residue, no discharged cartridge holes, no signs of a second person. The fight's timeline remains short-bracketed by the camera's final image and the distance to the cache site. The details that could be stated were physical pressure marks, torn fabric blood spatter absorbed by silt evidence that a large grizzly executed a fast, overpowering takedown and moved the remains about 150 yards into cover. On scenes like this, investigators warn the only reliable defense is the space you never surrendered. Late that afternoon, a trio on a short outing reached the Toklat gravel bar, read the same sign language. Shredded clothing, a ripped backpack, broad scuffs, and turned back without hesitation. They hustled to the Toklat River rest area and reported what they'd seen. By about 5:30 in the evening, rangers had the call. By around 8:30, they were in a helicopter, doors off rotors, bullying the air over willow flats. From above, they located a large male grizzly on a body in the underbrush, the same drag line leading in from the open bar. As the machine hovered and a team tried to deploy fading light and the bear's movement forced a retreat, the pilots and rangers stood off rather than compound risk in failing visibility. At first light the next day, a recovery team flew again with Alaska Wildlife troopers. During the approach, a trooper shot and killed the bear near the cache as the team moved to secure the site. Rangers completed their fieldwork and recovered White's remains that evening. A necropsy on the animal, along with the images in the camera and additional evidence, confirmed it was the same grizzly photographed before the attack. In the days that followed, closures spread across a swath of backcountry, while officials briefed parties, evacuated others, and revisited the training message issued to every permit holder: keep 300 yards from bears, back away the moment you are closer than that carry spray where you can reach it, and do not trade distance for a picture. The caution is not abstract, it can be measured in yards and seconds. If it changes an animal's behavior, you are too close. Park officials reviewed the sequence with rare clarity, 26 photographs over roughly 8 minutes, beginning at about 75 yards and ending around 60. A final set where the bear oriented toward the lens, a fast close, no images of the charge itself, no bear spray deployed because none was carried, a whistle listed on the permit, but no evidence it changed outcomes. The media asked for the frames, the family requested privacy. Investigators emphasized the same principle they brief year after year: distance is policy because distance is time, and time is the only opening that lets a person do anything else. Public conversation focused on gear choices and legal distances. Denali's guidance is plain: stay at least 300 yards from bears, leave the area if you find yourself closer, and never approach for a shot. Spray is strongly recommended. Firearms are a personal decision, but the most effective outcomes start with space and end with avoidance. For creators and viewers drawn to wild animal stories, here's the straight cut. This wasn't a mystery stalk, a nighttime camp rush, or an ambush beside a tent. It was a daytime open bar encounter where a human remained inside a hard rule until the only remaining variable was speed. Respect the spacing. Keep your spray where your hands live, not buried. Give up the frame if the frame costs you yards. And if you visit Denali, one of the last wide-open classrooms for how North America actually works, remember that the rules aren't there to dull the experience, but to keep it real enough that you get to take it home. And if you visit Denali, one of the last wide-open classrooms for how North America actually works, remember that the rules aren't there to dull the experience, but to keep it real enough that you get to take it home. In the hours after Richard White's death, that lesson moved from pamphlets to practice. Rangers issued an emergency backcountry closure around the Toklat River, and the adjoining units halted all hiking and camping and swept the gravel bars to turn back anyone drifting toward the scene. By first light, multiple parties were contacted and flown out, while investigators rebuilt the timeline from White's camera in the torn ground. At the briefing, Superintendent Paul Anderson explained that the recovered images showed the bear grazing, not acting aggressive until the final moments, a sequence that underscores why Denali requires roughly 300 yards between people and bears. Chief Ranger Pete Webster added that the last 5 photographs spanned about 15 seconds as the Grizzly lifted its head, oriented to the lens, and closed the gap in approach that likely preceded an immediate charge. Alaska wildlife troopers and NPS crews kept the perimeter tight, then returned at daylight, recovered White, and lethally removed the same large male grizzly at the cache. The necropsy paired with the camera data tied that animal to the fatal attack. Most closures were lifted after the recovery, but Unit 10, nearly 50 square miles of willow and braid, remained off limits for monitoring, while staff posted at access points to prevent re-entry. To answer the why that follows, every mauling biologist pointed to what the ground itself said. The drag line into cover and the guarded site matched known caching behavior. Bears often rake debris over a carcass to hide it from competitors and return later to feed, a strategy documented across brown bear systems from the Tetons to interior Alaska. Investigators also highlighted the distances locked into the images, roughly 60 to 75 yards well inside Denali's bear viewing minimum, erasing time for any other option once the animal advanced. In the broader record, officials reminded visitors that White's case was the first fatal bear attack in the park's then 90-year history and remains the only recorded one, a rare outcome with a clear prevention path. As bear safety specialists often note, properly carried bear spray stops aggressive encounters in about 9 out of 10 cases in Alaska, but even the best tool needs the space that distance provides. So here's the takeaway as you lace up your boots for Denali or any big backcountry, because the rule that keeps you safe also keeps wild places wild. Start with space you can measure for bears, hold at least 300 yards, and add more whenever brush or bends hide your view. Keep bear spray where your hands live, on a chest strap or belt, so you can draw and fire without digging in a pack. Practice the motion, pull the safety tab, aim low, and send a sweeping burst when an animal closes to roughly 25 to 30 feet, building a cloud it must pass through. Make steady sound in tight willows and along noisy rivers, so you do not surprise anything head down and feeding. Read sign like a tracker, fresh scat packed with berries, or hair, deep tracks with claw tips, overturned stones, shredded logs, a musky carcass smell. Each signal tells you to change course. If you see a carcass or a fresh kill site, leave immediately and give it far more than 200 yards. That ground is defended. If a bear spots you and squares its shoulders, jaw pops, huffs, or rushes, do not run. Stand your ground spray when in range, then back away. If a grizzly knocks you down, protect your neck and stay face down, legs spread, so it cannot flip you. If contact continues or turns persistent, fight with anything at hand. With black bears, fight from the start. In moose country, never stand between a cow and calf. Ears pinned back, hair raised, and ground stomping, mean move behind trees or boulders immediately. For wolves or coyotes, stand tall. Keep your pack on, gather your group, and back away in control. The pattern across species is simple and repeatable. Make distance early, stay visible and predictable, and keep tools ready where you can reach them in a heartbeat. Camp like a professional, so your presence does not train wildlife to associate people with food. Use a canister or approved soft-sided container. Cook, store, and sleep in a triangle with at least 100 yards between each point. Skip berry patches, game trails, and fish runs when you pick a tent site, and move on if you spot tracks threading straight through your chosen flat. Keep a clean kitchen, no grease in the dirt. No wrappers in pockets, no scented toiletries in your sleeping area. Pack out everything. Dogs belong on a leash or at home. An unleashed chase can end with an animal injured and your dog leading a threat straight back to you. For photographers and creators, the shot is the landscape plus the animal, not your proximity to it. Use long glass crop later and never trade yards for likes. If an animal changes speed, path, or posture because of you, you are already too close. Reset the scene by leaving. Respect closures and temporary area restrictions after incidents. They protect you and give field crews the quiet they need to finish the job, and they prevent more interactions while animals are still circling a cache site. Carry a paper map compass and a satellite messenger. Leave a plan with times and routes. Check weather and river levels before you go. Glacial braid bars can shift in a single storm, turning yesterday's safe crossing into today's deep cut. Report significant wildlife encounters to rangers, so the next party gets better information than you had. Above all, remember that prevention protects animals too. A fed fox becomes a problem. A photographed too close bear can become a case file. Keeping distance, storing food right, and obeying closures reduce lethal outcomes after conflicts. If you love the wild, keep it wild, give it room, move with care, and bring the story home without changing the place that gave it to you. We read every comment. Share your best trail safety tip, any close calls you've had, or the question you want wildlife rangers to answer next. Stay safe out there, keep your distance, and keep the wild, wild.